it's time to turn our attention back to the football. Daniel Harris, a very good morning to you.
Hello.
From a Manchester United perspective, are you jealous that Spurs got Conte?
No. I mean, that would really be a low if you're, as a United supporter, being jealous of Tottenham for anything. But no, I mean, I think Conte's really good. I definitely wonder if he's got the gas to get beyond Guardiola and Klopp, because although Conte did an unbelievable job to win the title that season with Chelsea, converting Victor Moses into an acceptable wing-back is not the way that you're going to win this league, I think because he was there when Klopp was rebuilding at Liverpool and in Guardiola's first season. And I think things have changed quite a lot since then. And I don't think that Conte would necessarily be the man to take United beyond them, because I think that he's less good than the two guys that are already at the top.
How are you going to get to a place where you're confident that Manchester United have that guy? Like, even if you take away job availability or who's not looking for a job at the moment, who is potentially that guy for Manchester United?
I don't know. I think that, I mean, if you were saying, if let's say that Solskjaer gets fired or leaves at the end of the season, then I guess I'll probably go for Pochettino, who may or may not be the right person. But what I think you get with him is you get someone who wants to build something, which I think is quite important with this United squad, because there are a lot of excellent young players in it. And Conte's not really that interested in that. And that's one of the reasons I don't think he'd be the best fit. Pochettino would want to build something. I also think the kind of high-energy football that Pochettino wants to play is something that he could actually play with United's forward line. Because if you think about it, let's say he was to come in the summer, then Cavani's not going to be there. Then you've got Ronaldo, who's got 1 year left. But apart from that, you're going to have Mason Greenwood, Jadon Sancho, Anthony Elanga, Marcus Rashford. And those players, if they can be bothered and instructed to, they're able to press from the front, to play aggressively, and have a lot of different abilities that would merge quite well into a good forward line. But I don't think that Conte would necessarily be so interested in developing those players, because he doesn't stay anywhere for long enough really to do that, although he is really good. And as I said at the beginning, the job that he did in getting Chelsea that league title, without him, they probably don't win that league title. And he did an incredible job in that season, and no one would deny that, but not every manager is right for every job. And I'm not certain that Conte would be the right man for this job. And I would personally be prepared to wait till the summer for Pochettino if Ole Gunnar Solskjaer gets fired. And I mean, we were sitting here last week discussing that as an inevitability, because that was how it looked. And I'm sure, I mean, it's an inevitability at some point, but United were good at the weekend. They didn't have very much to beat, but it may be that he's found a way of mitigating weaknesses and emphasising strengths. Who knows?
We'll come back to that in just a moment. But so is your belief that Pochettino would have the gas to take a club beyond Klopp and Pep, but Conte doesn't have that?
It's not so much that, although it is a little bit of that. It's also that I think that Pochettino would be a better fit for the players that United have.
Fair enough.
I don't think that Conte is like the negative Mourinho he's always said to be. Chelsea played some good stuff under him, mainly on the counter, but still they put some good stuff together. He was someone you thought maybe you'll fall out with. Eden Hazard didn't. So it's not exactly that, but he is a practical manager, and he seems to have particular things he likes and particular things he doesn't like, even though he doesn't, he for example, like, as I said last week, he wrote his thesis as Miguel Delaney of the Independents. They're playing 4 at the back, but he seems to have played 3 at the back quite a lot. I'm not sure that oh Christ, my wife's put the printer on, sorry about that. From downstairs, that is what that noise is. But he's an excellent motivator. The players want to play for him, and that is also something that's important. And he's organised, and with that Chelsea team, he worked out the best way of playing with that team that he had pretty quickly, and then all of a sudden they went on an unbelievable winning run. I mean, you can't not respect that, and you'd have to be an idiot not to respect that. But I think that the improvisational flair United have is not necessarily something that he's that into. I don't know. Like maybe I'm totally wrong. But would I expect Conte to take this United team past City and Liverpool? I don't really think that I would. I think there's a better chance that Pochettino would be able to do that. or be able to build something that might be able to do that in 2 or 3 years' time, which is not an amount of time I would particularly want to wait, or even necessarily an amount of time that I think should be waited for. But it just seems to me that Pochettino's approach of aggressive pressing, but also of inspiring the players in a way that I think might last a little bit longer than what Conte does, is something that would be a better fit.
That's fair enough. And like I said earlier on, that if Conte does a really good job at Tottenham this season, it doesn't necessarily mean that Manchester United missed out on Conte, because it's comparing apples with oranges here. So in the context of Tottenham Hotspur, how successful is this Conte thing going to work out?
I think it's a pretty good appointment. I'd say that Conte is probably the best manager that they could get. I thought Nuno was a bizarre appointment at the time, because if Joe Lewis, Daniel Levy and Enik aren't going to put the money in that it's going to take to make Tottenham contenders, and we know that they're not, the fact that Pochettino did it was due partly to Pochettino's brilliance, partly due to the fact that he had Harry Kane just at the club, ready to explode. And also, if you look at the teams that Pochettino's Spurs came second to, they came second to Leicester and they came second to Conte's Chelsea. That team was never going to take a title off the teams that came after that. So I think that he is the best manager that Tottenham could have got in terms of how good he is. But the fact that they then went and appointed Nuno was strange, because, as I said, if you're not going to put the money in that's going to enable you to contend for titles, then in order to keep the supporters in any way happy, you've got to get them entertained. And Nuno's teams do not play entertaining football. The way he played with that Wolves squad was a hate crime. They had loads of really lovely improvisational, creative players. They had Adama Traore, they had Raul Jimenez, they had Podence, they had Neto, although he's injured now. They had Moutinho, Neves. Lovely players, and he managed to turn them into something that was unbearably intolerable to watch, because they played so reactively and so slow when they didn't have to. And look, there's no right way to play football. You can play however you want to play, but I just found that watching Wolves was an extremely frustrating experience, because they should have been so much better than they were. Although Nuno had taken them to a good level, if you'd have put a better manager with that squad, or just a more attacking manager who would just let them go, I think you would have seen a much better team. I remember after lockdown, Wolves were still in with a chance of getting the top four. And I remember, I think they lost a game or drew a game at home to Sheffield United, where they were just sitting there. And it was just appalling to watch, because it didn't need to be like that. And Bruno Lage is, you watch Wolves now, and all of a sudden they look like a different team. I mean, whether they're a better team or not remains to be seen, because Nuno had them organised. But in terms of the actual activity of watching them, I'd much rather watch Wolves now than at any time during the last 2 or 3 years.
Daniel, the word reactive comes to mind when I think of Tottenham quite often. Like, you think of them reversing the furloughing of staff, you think of them backing down from the Super League when all the negativity came in from fans, and even you look at the match of the weekend, like in particular when I think it was Stephen Bergwijn came on for Lucas Moura, and the boos rang around the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium, and the cameras just panned to Nuno Espirito Santo, and you just knew that was the beginning of the end. Daniel Levy's looking on at that, seeing the boos, makes the cutthroat decision. And then you look at Old Trafford and you see the boos ringing around the stadium as the players walked off at half-time against Liverpool. And yet the United board stood still and stood firm and stood by their man, Ole Gunnar Solskjaer. So which do you look at it as the better move? Like, do you think boards and chairmen should be reactive like Levy, or do you look more, I guess, willingly towards things like holding on to your manager and standing firm as a bit more noble?
I mean, the situations are different, I guess. I mean, I think that Levy definitely did the right thing, because he made the wrong appointment and someone he wanted was available. But I would have happily seen Solskjaer leave the latest after Leicester, because that was definitely the point where I felt this isn't. However, this might get better periodically, but it's not going to get better enough. And the thing with United is they always have good enough players to beat any team, which is one of the reasons every time it looks like Ole's really in trouble. The players like him, they like playing for him, most of them. They find the performance for him because they're good. But it kind of depends if the manager you want is available. I don't think that United absolutely held on to Solskjaer after Liverpool, because everyone at the club was convinced that this was just a blip and they were going to get better enough. I don't think that's what happened. I think that if they'd have wanted Conte, they would have fired him. They would have installed Conte. They didn't want Conte. They either don't want Zidane. Zidane doesn't want them. He's also available. Then the other three candidates, who I think there seems to be uniform agreement that the names that have been discussed are Brendan Rodgers, Eric Ten Hag, and Mauricio Pochettino. None of them are available. So I think that United would probably want to try and stagger through to the end of the season and finish in the top four. And if they fire Ole, then what? If they can't get any of the names that they want, they've then got to find a caretaker manager. So what do? They appoint Solskjaer again to be the caretaker manager and hope to get into the top four. They have a problem. And I feel for their problem because, I mean, I don't feel for them as individuals because I don't particularly think they deserve that fellow feeling from me. But that if you need to get rid of your manager, but the guy you want isn't available, then what do you do? And I guess they decided to probably take stock where they felt if United did badly or lost to Tottenham, then lost to Atalanta, then lost to City, they would have to do something because at that point, top four is in a lot of peril. They're still in the Champions League, but with the games that are left, assuming they manage to find a way around young boys, they need a point from either the Atalanta game tonight or from Villarreal away. Those difficult games, and they would need a change of mood. But in fairness to Ole and in fairness to the players, he changed things a little bit and he got performance out of them. And you could point at the fact that he changed the formation to give the centre-back safety in numbers. I mean, that would be one thing that happened. I also kind of feel that the players should be ashamed of themselves that was necessary. But he also got Varane back. And I think even more than anything, they just ran a lot harder. They were much more aggressive. They ran harder and they were more sensible in the way that they did their running. And to me, that will always override intensity, and mentality will always override tactics. And although they did look to be comfortable in the formation that they played, I think the main thing was the fact that they ran harder and they played better.
Like something you mentioned there, Daniel, just to pick up on it, like you mentioned the managers who are available. And like I'm just looking at the headlines this morning linking Unai Emery to the Newcastle job, and the fact that they're quite willing to pay Villarreal whatever compensation package they need to get Unai Emery into St James's Park. Now, look, they have the Saudi money; they can certainly afford to do that. But should a club like Manchester United, like we as football fans, probably get obsessed with, okay, what top managers are available? Okay, Conte's gone. Who's next on the available list? Like, should a club like Manchester United of their caliber not be just looking at their list of managers and seeking out whoever they can get, whether they are currently available or not?
I don't think it's as simple as that. I mean, extracting Pochettino from Paris Saint-Germain pre-season, in the middle of the season, is probably quite a difficult thing to negotiate and to arrange. What if they don't want him to go? I mean, I don't know what it says in these guys' contracts, so it's very hard to talk specifically about it. Eric Ten Hag is doing really well at Ajax. He might be ready to move to a richer club, but he might also say, well, I want to finish the season here because, look, he's built a team. He might not want to disappear in the middle of the season. I mean, you can rationalise all of these things. Leicester probably have enough money to say no to Brendan Rodgers. I mean, Brendan Rodgers would probably leave if he could, because if he wanted to, he might also not want to, because he did it to Celtic. In order to take the Leicester job, he left Celtic when they were on for the treble because it was a step up for him, and Brendan Rodgers wanted to progress. But that doesn't mean he would necessarily do it, because who knows? I mean, maybe he fancies himself for the Manchester City job. That is also something that I've heard said. Don't know if it's true. It's not something that I'm saying has come from a source, but it's definitely something that is talked about. So there'll always be reasons, because you don't know what people's contract says. You don't know people's family situations. You don't know people's personal situations. So it's not always about simply paying the money to get someone when you want them, because sometimes you have to wait until the end of the season to get someone when you still want them, but not when you wanted them previously. And so I don't know. Let's say that United know that they could get Pochettino in the summer. Let's say, but they know that they can't get him before the summer. Would you appoint Brendan Rodgers before then to fill in that 6-month gap, even though he wasn't strictly the guy that you wanted? Personally, I wouldn't. But I can understand why someone might think about that. But ultimately, if you're trying to pick a manager who is the best manager that you want and you're sure that he is the right person, then you would wait for them, I think, in the same way that you might wait for a player that you wanted rather than buy a second choice. And the manager is even more important than that, because if you get it wrong, it could set your club back seasons and cost an absolute stack of money.
One of the reasons that has been listed by Conte maybe he wasn't interested in Tottenham over the summer was just an element of uncertainty around some of the positions. And I think James Horncastle has been reporting that in the interim, the signing of the likes of Emerson Royal and Christian Romero answered a couple of those questions. But really, Daniel, the biggest level of uncertainty around that Tottenham squad is with Harry Kane. How do you see this playing out? Because if Conte gets a tune out of Harry Kane, is he just not a more attractive prospect for Manchester City once again next summer?
It's hard to know because you don't know whether with Harry Kane is physically we've seen the best of him. He'll always be a good player, but you can see the way that he's playing now is that it feels like he doesn't trust himself as much to get away from defenders. So instead of moving away from the ball to get into position, he's coming towards the ball so he can try and get on it under pressure. That might be because he's still recovering, he's not properly fit, or it might be because he didn't get a proper break in the summer and the Euros took their toll, or it might be that just he's had one injury too many. And it's also hard to know because of the way that Nuno was playing is probably not a way that suited Harry Kane because Wolves are so slow apart from when they're countering. And the thing with Harry Kane is what's brilliant about Harry Kane, apart from just the overall fact that Harry Kane's a brilliant player, when I watch him is that how early he shoots. That's one of the reasons he's so deadly from kind of that 15 to 22 yard range. I'm not sure I've ever seen anyone better. But in order to do that, you have to get the ball to him early because he shoots early. And I think that under Nuno, Tottenham weren't really doing that. So perhaps that was also encouraging him to come deeper. But he's not been getting great service. He's not been playing in a team that is confident. He's playing in a team that probably isn't that confident in the manager. So it may be that Harry Kane is now past his best. And I mean, we saw it with Alan Shearer, where after the second cruise ship, he was still an excellent player, but he wasn't as good as he was. He was still good for years and years after that. So perhaps he's also learning how to change his game because physically he can't do the things that he used to. But as you say, the way that he's able to perform under Conte will tell us a lot about that because Conte will probably have a better idea of how to build a team that suits him.
Daniel, just looking at the United formation and trying to think ahead of the formation they're going to play tonight against Atalanta. And we know Victor Lindelof is out after picking up a knock in training. That probably means if he sticks with the three at the back or the five at the back, whatever way you look at it, either Eric Bailly comes in or Luke Shaw comes into the left-hand side of the three with Tellez as a wing-back. But when you think of the larger scheme of things and you think of that formation and the formations that Solskjaer tends to put out, you look at people like Donny van de Beek and Jadon Sancho, and look, Gary Neville referenced it at the weekend and tried to, I guess, ruminate and think about how these two guys who cost so much money are going to fit into this team. Like, I saw the photographs of the players getting onto the plane to Bergamo yesterday from Manchester, and Donny van de Beek, the only guy without a smile on his face. I watched him cool down after the Liverpool game by himself for 10 minutes on the Old Trafford pitch with a coach. Just such a dejected-looking figure. £35 million. Like, it feels like Groundhog Day to ask you about Donny van de Beek's situation, but really, when you look on now, you have to wonder who made this call of signing Donny van de Beek.
It does happen sometimes where a club signs a player and it turns out not to be what they want. It happened, like Mourinho didn't play Mkhitaryan for months and months, although he did end up scoring in the Europa League final. But for whatever reason, I mean, he wasn't United's first choice. They got him, I guess, because he was cheap. And for whatever reason, Ole doesn't rate him. And for me, when I've watched him play, I can see why he's not getting in the team. I think he's not a bad player. He's kind of tidy, but he allows the game to pass him by. And he doesn't get involved enough. And that's been the thing for me. And the problem is that Bruno plays in his best position, and Bruno is United's best player. And United haven't developed to a point where they feel comfortable rotating out Bruno. In terms of the formation that United are now playing, if they are going to now be a 3-4-1-2 team, then they need to play it in all the games, I think. Because if you look at what Chelsea did, Tuchel came in, he made a decision that was how he wanted Chelsea to play. And they play like that in every game. If they're playing a crap team at home, they still play the same way. They still play that formation because ultimately the best teams play the same way almost every game. They'll have a few other formations up their sleeves that they can call upon if they need them. But more or less, Liverpool play 4-3-3 basically every game. They might change it. They changed it a little bit to 4-4-2 last season when things weren't going well for them. City play 4-3-3. Chelsea play 3-4-1-2. And they play it in every game because that's how you create the relationships and the automatisms that enable you to play fast football. And I think it's quite interesting, this 3-4-1-2, because in a way, playing that way with United is a hate crime because it means that you're going to have so many good players on the bench every time. But if it gives you your defensive solidity, then you would bargain on the three attackers being able to play the right way, to find a goal, to find a moment in every game where they'll score at least once. You also have all those other players that you can bring on, and you've also the advantages that it gives you is that the midfield players in front of the back four, they can properly go forward. So Scott McTominay and Fred have sort of been bundled bundled up in the number 6 role because United don't have anyone to play that. Now, those guys are not that. Like, they're athletes, they're runners rather than sitters and passers. But the way that you saw Scott McTominay play, particularly against Tottenham, where he's running past men, he's carrying the ball forward, one of the reasons he's able to do that is because he's got 3 centre-backs behind him, and he's also got 2 wing-backs who are defenders. So in the first instance, he knows that he's got security and he's able to do that. He's able to extract the most from his talent because that's what Scott McTominay is. He's a ball carrier, he's a ball winner, and he's someone who can run into the box past the forward players. That's what he is. And he's not been able to do that. And when he is able to do that, you're going to see better performances from him, and that's going to make the team better. I think the other thing that is quite useful with that formation is that because you've got 3 centre-backs who are all good on the ball, they can all carry the ball, they can all pass the ball, it means that the lack of that number 6 is less keenly felt because you've got 3 defenders that can all basically perform that task. They're all good enough on the ball with a good enough range of passing to be able to build the play. And that, in turn, pushes the midfield players further forward where you want them to be. And it means that you're eradicating one of the weaknesses in that team was the lack of a player able to control the game, able to build attacks. You've got 3 players that are able to do that. And the other thing that I couldn't help but notice is that I don't think that Chelsea's highest level is the highest level of all the teams in the Premier League. I don't think it's really even that close to it. But the way the Premier League is now, if you look at all the teams, almost all the teams in the league, apart from perhaps the bottom 3, the bottom 4 or 5, have a player, if not several players, that are able to hurt you. And I don't think it's a coincidence that the team who are top of the league are not the team with the highest top level, but the team who are most solid. And I think that's Chelsea, that they don't always score that many goals. I mean, they're improving in that aspect, but the front players aren't really scoring. But they're very, very difficult to break down. And with the players that they have, Havertz, Mount, whoever it is, Lukaku, Werner, Ziyech, they will find a goal or 2 in every game, pretty much. And if they're not conceding many, then that will often be enough to win them games. And as I said, because you're finding that Liverpool are getting caught at home by Brighton, for example, and I watched that game, and Brighton should have won. Liverpool were not as good as Brighton on that day. And that's because if you look at the players that Brighton have, they've got lots and lots of players who can hurt you, and they play an attacking style of football that can find the weaknesses in your defence. And if your defence doesn't have many weaknesses, if you're able to neutralise a team like Brighton, then you can rely on your players with star quality to make a difference. And that's one of the reasons. I mean, I don't like 3 at the back in general. I don't like the fact that United had played it in the last game. I think the players should be ashamed of themselves that was where they had to go. But I can see that in the future, that might be a sensible way of deploying United's resources to make the best team out of them, because it makes them very hard to break down, but you still back them to score a goal or 2 in every game. And so I think that the way that United usually play is actually not bad for Atalanta, because Atalanta leave a lot of space in behind, as we saw in the first game. And whatever formation United play tonight, I would definitely be playing at least Marcus Rashford as one of the strikers, because I think that Atalanta leave gaps that United will want his pace to attack. But I think they'll probably will play the 3 at the back against City and then at the weekend. And then they do need to make a decision. And if they are deciding that at the moment that's the best way, then they need to commit to that style and play it in every game.
Yeah, and just to finish up then very quickly on that City game, because it's such a huge game this Saturday afternoon. What you said about Brighton against Liverpool there, you could say the exact same thing about Crystal Palace, that they were full value for that win on Saturday afternoon. Does that speak to a real level of vulnerability that you're seeing in this Manchester City team this season?
I don't think it's the level of vulnerability exactly. I mean, it's that other teams are good. Other teams have got good players who can get at you. And if that happens, then you're going to have a problem. And that was what we saw with City. I don't think City are particularly great at the back. I don't think Pep Guardiola has ever had a team that is great at the back. He's had great teams that have great defensive records because they don't have to defend that much. But I don't think he's got great defenders, and I don't think City are great at the back. So if you can get enough of the ball, and if you're brave, then you can absolutely get at City. And we've seen it from United over the last couple of seasons. So I wouldn't say that they're vulnerable. I mean, I think that they're probably the best team in the league, or at least their top level is the highest of all the teams in the league. But they have to bring that level more often to win games now, because teams understand how to play against Pep Guardiola teams, and they have good enough players to exploit the weaknesses in them. And I think that if United turn up against City and they defend properly, then City know that they'll be in for a difficult game, because with the attackers United have, they're able to create chances against anyone.